So welcome to Platonic Conference, and thank you for coming. My question would be, where your particular academic interests lie, and what is your sphere of interest?
Well, as you can imagine, ancient philosophy and Plato, and I've been working during the last years on a book on Plato's Republic, and it came out last year.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. It took very long time. Actually, I began working on it 20 years ago, and I didn't plan it. I began working on some subjects of the Republic. As you know, there are many subjects which will be handled in the Republic, and I began with a study of the book 8th and 9th, the unjust souls and regimes, and I didn't expect going further with that, and so I did it. And it brought me back also to some studies which I did before on the Parmenides, and at that time I tried to show that the dialogue, the Parmenides, shows the same structure as the cave and the line on the Republic, and didn't think that the Republic itself would share this structure. Actually, I was strongly criticized. Some people said that my approach was a Neoplatonic one because I understood certain spatial movements and categories metaphorical, and they said that it's not Plato. So I went further working in the Republic, and in the course of time I discovered that these spatial movements are very clear, metaphorical, also in the Republic. And so I begin my book with the Republic and finish it with the Parmenides. And after 20 years, as I said.
Quite a way.
Yes.
And what will you be doing the report on tomorrow? Briefly.
Yes. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, actually. Yes, I'm taking part of my book, and Plato is very difficult to say the last word about something in Plato, and as I went further teaching on Plato's Republic, I discovered that some subjects were not worked enough in my book, and I said, okay, I try to develop this further, and this is on the structure of the soul and the nature of the mathematical entities and the relation of the analysis, the study of the soul and mathematical entities with the kind of knowledge which is called dianoia in the line. There is, as you know, a very big discussion about this, about the nature of the mathematical entities, and my approach, the one I showed in my book, allowed me to show some news about that. I think you have to understand these two subjects, the structure of the soul and the nature of mathematical entities, not just considering the passages where they are directly handled, but also considering the whole of the Republic. And so it's a kind of dialectical relationship between the whole and the part of the dialogue. And that's the way I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's great. So, as philosophers, we're usually asked, what is the value of what we're doing? Why we're studying the antiquity and why we're doing ancient studies? What do you think is the value and use of that for the modern life? I mean,
well, first of all, I would say some words about the study of ancient philosophy and philosophy at all, because this question relates to the one you asked for. Someone has said that the study of history of philosophy without philosophy is impossible, and philosophy without history of philosophy is blind. They complement each other. You need to do both in order to study them well, and to understand them well. I would say, and that's a very well-known saying, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. So we shouldn't forget these giants. They put the questions which still are worrying us. Also, if they gave some different answers and other answers, in a way we are working because they began this. They state these questions and offer some answers. If you forget the history of philosophy, it could happen that you discover the Americas in the 21st century, and you have to avoid that. I'm not saying that there's nothing new under the sun, but it's better to have that in mind. And also, we say that we live in a global world today. So that means that we need also to try to understand completely different cultures. And that's not easy. And I believe that the study of ancient culture, not just philosophy, but culture at all, shows us to understand, even if they were worried about the same subjects as we are now, their approach was different, and the historical situation and cultural situation was different. But to try to understand them is a way also to train our way of looking at things so that we can understand other cultures as well. And that's a thing I think is still good for us when studying ancient philosophy. And of course, I mean, as a Plato student, you have to think on the dialogue form, and I suppose I'm not the first one who would say that. So it's dialogue, it's important for democracy. Also, if the kind of democracy which Plato criticizes is quite another form. But funnily, or not funnily, but tragically, sometimes democracy will in fact develop that way in our times, so that many people think democracy is to do whatever they want, and that
not
is
exactly,
not exactly what we have to do, and together with that, you have to think also on, not metaphysically, but that politicians should think on the common good also. Well,
if you were a politician, what would you change in the academic sphere in your country or worldwide?
Well,
what would you introduce?
It's very difficult that become politician directly. But we all know that the humanities are in a big crisis nowadays, and that's a pity. If I could do something about that, I would try to insist on keeping the humanities, not just at the university level, but also in the schools. Even philosophy at a certain level in the schools, it is evident that the humanities try to build a critical consciousness, which is more needed nowadays than ever before. So that's where I will insist.
Yeah, and in your university, in the place where you're working, do people pay enough attention, as you think, to ancient studies, or it's at the edge of the academic area? Do many people pay attention to that? Do they study it a lot?
Well, it changes, you know. Actually, or luckily, my university started as a university for the humanities. Nowadays, it's quite bigger, and you have many other studies. We live also this crisis in the humanities in our university, but it's a good thing that we started as a humanities, as a university in the humanities, and luckily, in our department, they are very conscious of the need of studying not just philosophy, but any area of the humanities, and taking into account the history. And so we are happy about that. In any case, you notice sometimes young people prefer to study contemporary philosophy immediately from the start, you know. And as it happens, after a few years, and sometimes also after they have finished their studies, they come to me and said to me, "Oh, I would like to do again this course with you and read this dialogue with you," and so on, because afterwards they notice how important it would be to have this horizon in order to understand things better, you know. That's what I would say.
What would you wish to your Russian colleagues, to colleagues in St. Petersburg?
It's very difficult to say something to you.
Not knowing us yet.
Pardon?
Not knowing us yet, probably.
Yes, yes. But I don't know your history very well, but I have in different publications I have noticed that there is a tradition here which continues the Platonic tradition, and absolutely unknown to me, and not just to me, but to many scholars in the whole world. And it is astonished to see how this tradition persists, and you began to discover, I don't know if discover, but to make that known. And I would say, please work further on that way, you know. I don't know how is this conference going to take place. I am asking you now, do you happen to know if the conference if the Russian colleagues will speak in Russian or English?
Well, they will be translated. Some of them will speak English. Some of them will be translated.
Okay. I would say don't forget to use your own language. Actually, the International Plato Society is, in this case, is very open, and we have many official languages. And the tendency is, of course, to deliver talks in English mostly, but I would say you can use any other languages also.
Yeah, the conference will proceed for 3 days. The third day will be totally in Russian, so it will be mostly for Russian colleagues. So,
yeah. Okay, that's a wonderful thing that you do. Some colleagues of mine, they deliver their talks in English somewhere. I believe we should do that in Spanish. Not everywhere. I am aware of that. I mean, if I come to Russia and I speak in Spanish, nobody will understand me. Some very few, and that doesn't make sense. That's what I try to improve my English. You know, our colleagues here do not understand just English, but also, for example, German or French. And I could also have spoken in German. It should be this plurality.
Various, versatile. Yeah, I see. It's very important. Yeah, people rarely think
Keep
about
that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that good wish. Thanks you for the interview.
Thanks to you for inviting me also.
Thanks for coming.